Hi guys and girls, we're going to talk about the hips and why they're so important in life. So the hips are the hub of your power. You start using your hips when you're sitting down, getting up, very simple things like that, walking. It improves the way that you hold yourself as well. So hips come from, first of all, you've got the feet, which are very important in blogs I've talked about before, but then it transfers into the power of the hip. And the hip basically gets you to sit up, sit down, to rotate, to move, to pick your kid up, to walk around, to go for a sprint. It's with the glutes, it's where all the power comes from. If you were a fighter, for example, and you're about to punch, it's the hips that need to get involved to generate the force, and it ends up into the fist. I've been doing a bit of Thai boxing, so I've got into the kinetics or the movement of punches and kicks. But yeah, what I've realized is hips are really important. I've had noticed babies as well, when they sit down into a full squat. So it just shows the mobility of a hip. But if you see someone sitting in an office on a chair, chairs aren't designed at the level of the hip. They're at a hinge point of the hip. So what's happening is a lot of people are sitting down in offices for hours upon hours. And a lot of problems that I have from clients that come and see me is that they're in that hinge point for way too long. They turn up kyphotic, very tight in the hip flexors, so in the groin area, and they're just very tight and not as mobile as they'd like to be. And obviously, if that's pulling down at you in that way in the hip flexor, you tend to tilt forward, especially if you're taller. You're going to hunch more, you're going to be bent slightly forward, so it's almost like you're hinged, that you haven't got a free door opening. So hips are super important from baby age all the way till when you're in your elder years. So I had a client who was about 92 years old, and I've seen him around, and hips were really important for him, because to sit up and to get up and sit down and get out of bed, for example, that becomes quite challenging because you get stiffer and stiffer if you don't keep mobile. So mobility is a really important factor in hip flexibility, longevity and health. So you'd want to do things like opening the groin out, because the groin, it actually limits and it tightens the hip. So you want to be able to do movements that rotate around the groin. And obviously you'd go into these positions for 30 to 60 seconds, or if you wanted to meditate and relax and get rid of anxiety, you do deep breathing for about 4 minutes. So you want to get the mobility of the groin, opening up the glutes. That would be one direction. Another direction would be the front split, which is a yoga move. And so you'd start from like 90-degree angle. You'd move your leg forward. Now, you don't have to do this in one sitting, but I'm just showing you the progressions of what you would do. And you could hold these positions for about 30 seconds each, and then eventually you'd get into like that position that you want to do. So I'm not suggesting you do that straight away, because it's a progression. And by the way, I taught myself how to do that move specifically. The box one I could do when I was a kid, because I was doing Kung Fu and I could always do that. The previous one I just showed you, the front split, I learned when I was 29 or 30. I read a book called The Light of Yoga, and I read that if you stayed in any position every day for 4 minutes and did deep breathing and relaxed into it, you could do any position. So I wanted to challenge it. That's my nature. I did it for 6 months, and I did not believe my hip could move in that position. So absolutely anyone can do it, unless you've got a hip replacement or certain injury that doesn't allow you to do that. Then I would not do that. I'd do mobility. That's another story for another blog and video. But anyway, you want to have flexibility. That's one factor of the hip, because the hip moves side to side, forward, up, down, for many reasons, sexual, active. You know, if you want to be a great sexual performer, a Casanova, hip motion's really important. So if you want that sort of health, that's important. If you've got kids that want to play sports really well, football, whatever, hip power is really important for kicks, for rotations, for moving quickly and powerfully, forwards, back, twisting, all of those things. So you want flexibility to be able to move well. The other factor of flexibility a lot of people are missing are its amazing ability to allow your muscles to recover. So I tend to be able to train more times than most trainers, not because I'm better or stronger, but it's actually because I'm very flexible. And my theory behind that is flexibility creates recovery a lot quicker. So flexibility is really important. But, a big but, there's no point being flexible if you don't have strength. So without strength, there's no point. So another factor of hip health is to do things like squats, back squats, overhead squats, deadlifts, wide grip deadlifts. Even if you've got the skill set to do Olympic lifts like the snatch and clean and jerk, because what they do is get you to do that that external internal movement of the hip and power of the hip. Now if you wanted to get so that's for strength. Now if you wanted to get dynamic power, I'd recommend doing martial arts for the hip, where you get the rotation of the hip. So any punching or kicking is going to give you the rotation, or even dancing if you're into ballet, for example. So I'm trying to give you different options to have healthy hips, to be able to move freely, powerfully and flexibly. There's one last thing that I think you need for your hips, and it's more to do with the lockout of the hip, and it's more to do with balance, because as you get older, balance becomes more challenging if you don't work it. So simple things like locking your leg out and driving your knee up and then closing your eyes and then just holding it there. As you can see, well, it's my first time, but if I do it on the other side, it's quite challenging. And what you want to do is you want to be able to get that lockout. That lockout is going to enable you to lock the hip fully, but feel all the muscles sort of work around it to lock it out. As you can see, this is involuntary. So for example, when I do this, I'm just locking my glute and my core. But if you look at my feet, I'm not thinking about what they're doing. They're just moving side to side. And so I'm having involuntary muscle responses trying to protect it and work around it. You want those muscles to help you out unconsciously to not trip over, for example. That's a good example of how it helps you. Anyway, long blog, but a lot of points, very important. Have healthy, flexible, really good balanced hips that work well for you, to have a healthy lifestyle, to hang out with your kids, to do fun stuff, to excel in sports, to just stand tall. And if you want some personal coaching from myself, check out the website awpts.com for the best training of your life. See you soon.